Welcome back to the KAHI Afternoon News. Good afternoon. I am Casey Freelove. Pleased to be joined by Congressman Tom McClintock for our weekly conversation. And Tom, let's start with just a quick follow-up on the topic we've been discussing for a few weeks. I was reading an article, and we've been doing news stories on Governor Newsom proposing that the state of California could take over Pacific Gas and Electric if the utility company doesn't pull itself out of bankruptcy by the middle of next year. I guess my simple question is, how complicated would that be to kind of have our state government take over the largest utility in basically the Western United States? And do you think that that's a feasible solution, or maybe will that propel PG&E to kind of get their act together?
Well, I've always believed that the transmission lines are very much like our highways. Anybody ought to be able to use them and pay a fee for their construction and maintenance. That's what we do, at least we used to do, through our gas taxes until they were ripped off for purposes unrelated to our highways. But if you had a system like that where the state took over responsibility for all the transmission lines and then allow every producer and every consumer to put power on that grid and to take it off on the basis of contracts that they've made with each other, I think that system would be vastly better because it would open up enormous pressures for competition that would produce lower prices and greater choices for consumers. If a consumer wanted to spend twice as much for their electricity in order to buy green power, they ought to have the right to do that. If a consumer wants to buy the cheapest power available, well, they ought to have the right to do that too. And the only way to assure that freedom of choice and all of the competitive pressures that produce reliability as well as low cost, then it seems to me the best thing to do would be to take over the state takes over the transmission lines, just as it has responsibility over our highways, and then allow people to decide for themselves what kind of power they'll put on, what kind of power they'll take off, and as long as that balances because of contracts arranged by a willing seller and a willing buyer, I think that would be a vastly superior system.
Boy, that's interesting. I've not heard that from any other person I've talked to. I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, again, it's kind of allowing the consumer to pick and choose. Whether if you want to go fully environmental with green, then you can, or if you want to maybe save your family a little bit of money, you have that option too. I like that.
Well, and now there's one area where this breaks down, of course, and that is the state's taking lousy care of our highways. But at least we know who's responsible for that. And in the meantime, even in their decrepit condition, people still have the freedom to use them as they pay their gasoline taxes.
Let me change topics. I want to get your reaction to just the shocking news out of Mexico that after a cartel attack, as it's been described, killed 9 people. I was reading one of the relatives saying that this was a direct attack from one cartel, and President Trump reacting by saying, no, if Mexico needs help, then we're willing to go down there and help them fight this war. What does this mean with our relationship with Mexico? Because, I mean, obviously, anytime you hear of women and children being murdered, it's so hard to digest. You can't even process really as a human being that somebody could do that to somebody else.
Well, in my view, that is Mexico's business, not ours.
Okay.
We should not be committing American resources for that purpose, even with the invitation of the Mexican government. That is their responsibility. What does trouble me far more is that the same cartels that are wreaking havoc in Mexico are also now operating in the United States because of our porous borders. Just yesterday, Deputy Sheriff Brian Ishmael of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office was laid to rest after being savagely gunned down by illegal aliens operating as part of a drug cartel here in our own backyard. That's been made possible because of left-wing politics that has left our borders wide open and has extended sanctuary protections to criminal illegal aliens who, after breaking our immigration laws to be here in the first place, then go on and break other laws and after they have been arrested and sentenced, convicted and have served their sentences, then instead of being deported back to their own country as the law requires, these sanctuary laws require them to be released right back into our own communities. This is absolutely insane, and I cannot for the life of me understand why the people of California aren't in open revolt over these ridiculous laws, because they are putting law enforcement, and they're putting our communities at grave risk. And don't forget, this is not the first time this has happened.
Right.
Just 5 years ago, we lost two sheriff's deputies, Michael Davis and Danny Oliver, to a thrice-deported illegal immigrant who went on a killing spree. When are we going to get serious about securing our borders and getting these people the hell out of our country?
That's a great point, and it's been glossed over in the media, too. I think the fact that illegal aliens were involved with this. I mean, if you just read the kind of the generic press release, it points out, 4 gunmen or men that were involved, but they don't kind of get to the heart of the issue that you're talking about. And I think if they did maybe do their jobs a little better, then maybe more Californians and Americans would be up in arms about it.
No, the left does not want you to know this information, and that's why they go to great lengths to suppress it. And in fact, we do have a pretty clear indication of how much crime is being caused by illegal immigrants, because when the state government then applies for federal grants, they have to tell the federal government how many illegals they have in the prison system, and it is a substantial number. But they won't tell you that directly. You have to go into those reports where they're trying to get money out of the federal government to support this population of illegal immigrants who are in our jails and prisons. But the biggest problem is that when they're released, they're supposed to be deported out of the country, and instead, because of Gavin Newsom's sanctuary laws and Jerry Brown's sanctuary laws, these criminals are released right back into our communities.
We're visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. I just have one question on the impeachment hearing, and I may have asked you this before, but I see the House Intelligence Committee is going to hold its first open hearings next week as part of the formal impeachment inquiry into President Trump. My question is, does this mean that Congress and the Senate and basically our government, which is supposed to be out there passing bills and laws to help the American public, do you have to put everything on hold to deal with this, or will you still be able to kind of get other things done in the middle of all this? Because I know that we've talked about your thoughts on this, and the way that they've gone about it is absolutely ridiculous, but does it prevent you from actually doing your day-to-day duties?
Pretty much. The Democrats are totally obsessed on this, and again, as a member of the Judiciary Committee, yes, we have put other bills out, pretty bad bills actually, but so much of our attention has gone into the impeachment proceedings as the Democrats have cast about for one pretext after another on which to hang an impeachment vote, and right now that is going on inside the Intelligence Committee, and of course when they're doing that they can't be addressing all of the other foreign threats that we're facing right now.
If nothing becomes of this, my opinion, it nothing will. Do you think that the American public will kind of be wary of the folks that in effect are preventing you guys from doing what you want to do, which is, as I talked about, pass laws and bills, do things that need to be done? Do you think that people are keeping track of that?
Frankly, I don't think that's the main issue. The main issue is the misuse of the constitutional impeachment process, which is reserved for treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. In this case, the president was acting entirely within his authority and his responsibility as president. There is credible evidence that Hunter Biden had been hired by Burisma Holdings, which is a Ukrainian oil and gas company, to sit on its board, despite having no experience in either Ukrainian affairs or the oil and gas industry. Joe Biden, his father, as vice president, boasted that he had threatened to withhold aid to the Ukraine unless the government fired the Ukrainian prosecutor general, Viktor Shokin, who says, according to Shokin, was in the middle of a corruption investigation involving Hunter Biden and about $3 million in fees that Biden and his partner had collected from Burisma. Now, the president has a conversation with the incoming president of the Ukraine, says, hey, there's a lot of smoke here. I expect you to look into this. And the Ukrainian president says, of course we are. Well, is that illegal? On the contrary, that is precisely what the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act tells the president he has to do. It requires that before the president releases funds, he has to certify that the government of Ukraine has taken substantial actions to make defense institutional reforms, quote, for purposes of decreasing corruption, increasing accountability, and sustaining improvements of combat capability. Well, corrupt dealings between American and Ukrainian officials involving petroleum acquisitions certainly falls within this mandate, and that is what the president did. To try to build a case for impeachment out of that is absurd, and I fully expect, as all of the facts come out, the American people are going to reach that conclusion as well.
Well, and I just have to thank you because it's a very confusing topic, and when you lay it out like that, at least it's more digestible. And I think if folks want to look into it themselves, they'll find that information is true. So that's actually very helpful.
And by the way, those four facts I think are beyond dispute. The president requested the cooperation of the Ukrainian government into looking into this. Biden was on the Burisma board, being paid an enormous amount of money. Joe Biden, the father, is vice president. This is not supposition. He actually bragged about it at a Council of Foreign Relations Committee last year. And the prosecutor that he had fired says, I was in the middle of looking into all of this when I was told, in fact, this was in a report by John Solomon of The Hill, that when he was fired in March of 2016, Shokin was told the reason was that Biden was unhappy with the Burisma investigation. And Shokin actually filed a sworn affidavit before a European court, and his testimony in that affidavit is, quote, the truth is that I was forced out because I was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into Burisma Holdings, a natural gas firm active in Ukraine, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was a member of the board of directors. That was his testimony, sworn testimony, in a European court. So these issues, unless Shokin is just flatly lying, there's no dispute over his claims, over what was going on, and over the president's responsibility to get to the bottom of it. And just because Joe Biden is a candidate for president does not shield him from investigation. Remember, especially when there is probable cause to believe that a crime was committed.
Right.
Now compare that, by the way, to candidate Trump, who was under criminal investigation for 3 years, including throughout the campaign, on the pretext of a dossier funded by the Clinton campaign that the officials knew was false at the time they launched the investigation. And I think all that's going to be coming out very clearly.
We've been visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. Tom, as always, thank you for the time. We appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
My pleasure. Casey, thanks for having me.
We'll take a quick break and be right back here on KAHI.